Number 10. Omega Red. While Omega Red has also lost to Wolverine in the past, he's also had his fair share of victories against him. Omega Red initially proved almost too powerful to Wolverine, especially when it came to the use of death spores, which weakened him. There was a time when Omega Red successfully captured the hero, and he only succeeded in surviving by getting help to escape, unfit to take on Omega Red alone. More recently in the comics, Omega Red surfaced wanting to join Krakoa, but he was actually revealed to be in league with Dracula, and in fact helped Dracula to get his hands on Wolverine's blood, enabling the villain to walk in the sun. Since then, Omega Red has chosen to portray Dracula being truthful with the mutants and becoming their true ally, but Logan of course still finds it hard to trust him. He doesn't really believe he's the true ally. Perhaps because Wolverine himself remembers all the times that Omega Red has stabbed him in the front and the back and just basically stabbed him all around with his carbonadium tentacles. Number 9. Mysterio. Mysterio in an alternate reality completely defeats Wolverine, and in the most horrible way. In the Old Man Logan continuity, Mysterio manipulated Wolverine, getting him to fight against and kill all the X-Men, explaining how this could have happened given all their amazing abilities by claiming that his friends would likely hesitate to take him out. Wolverine at the time thought he was taking on a bunch of supervillains who had invaded the mansion, and Mysterio also claims that Wolverine's ego is kinda to blame for him accepting the illusion. After all, Wolverine believing that he could have possibly taken on all of these supervillains himself all at once does seem pretty arrogant. I gotta say, I kind of agree with Mysterio here. And friends, before we move on to the next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists where we get to tell you stories about people kicking other people's butts, I love telling these stories, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Sabretooth. Sabretooth has beaten Logan so many times that I've personally lost count. Sometimes it seems as though Victor's sole purpose has been to make Wolverine suffer. Case in point, how it became a tradition for Sabretooth to go and mess up Wolverine once a year on his birthday. Sabretooth has also been the mastermind behind a great deal of psychological plots to mess with Logan, including at one point pitting his son Daken against him, forcing Wolverine to kill his own son. Wolverine thought this was how it had to be at the time, but he would actually later learn that it all happened due to the machinations of Sabretooth. People don't often think about how smart Sabretooth is, but he's pretty crafty. Number 7. Mystique. Mystique is one of those villains you don't want to underestimate because, well, it's really dangerous to do so. Case in point, why do I say case in point so much? Who's been saying that to me that I've been putting this in my script? An example being when Wolverine thought he had killed her and would never see her again, only for her to return having been resurrected by the Hand to get revenge on Wolverine for killing her. She not only defeated him in a physical sense, but also in a mental sense, using him to get information and also to mess with his head when she posed as Yukio. She really messed with him. But that's Mystique for you. Number 6. Spore. While Spore was an insanely powerful villain who did end up defeated in the end, it wasn't actually Wolverine that did the defeating in this scenario. Though he did fight against Spore. Spore appears in one of the earlier stories in Wolverine Volume 2 and was created by Archie Goodwin and John Byrne. It was an ancient entity who first appeared in issue 21, where we learned that the drug that was being used to increase the strength of Roundhouse at the cost of his sanity was actually a part of that villain, and that using that drug was kind of how it infected its victims and was able to move more into the physical world through them. Spore, it turned out, was an ancient bioweapon created by the Deviants long ago that had laid dormant on planet Earth after requiring the strength of a Celestial in order to be defeated the first time around. Although Wolverine struggled to defeat this enemy, the possibly mutant healer Sister Salvation managed to use her powers to defeat it, cleansing Spore permanently, but at great cost, with her hands and possibly ability to heal becoming dramatically damaged afterwards. But Wolverine couldn't have done that alone. He needed the Sister Salvation backup for that one. Number 5. Madeline Pryor. Another enemy who Wolverine likely wouldn't stand a chance against is Madeline Pryor. In the What If Inferno issue, we get to see what would happen if Madeline Pryor had won the day and she and Sim basically turned Wolverine into their little pet, unleashing his feral side and making him a complete monster. And I really do mean a complete monster. The hero doesn't even stand a chance against their influence as they help him to give in to the darker side of himself that he's always been working so hard to repress. It's even worse than losing a battle or his life, because in this story Wolverine loses his morality and basically his humanity. I think that's worse. Is that worse than death? I think it's worse than death. If you lose entirely who you are. Number 4. Dracula. Dracula is a long-standing villain for the X-Men and Wolverine. As we discussed earlier with Omega Red, the villain recently managed to best Wolverine by concocting a plan to capture him and use his blood to power up himself and his other loyal vampires, forcing Omega to become his undercover agent on Krakoa. Of course, in the end, Omega Red would turn against him, allowing Wolverine and the other mutants to strike back, but during that first story of the new series back in issue 1, Wolverine saw himself pretty heartily defeated at the hands of Dracula, and what made it worse is that he didn't really even understand at the time that he had been playing right into Dracula's hands. Number 3. Magneto. Magneto is of course another major supervillain who bested Wolverine. He was the one responsible for transforming him into a feral version of himself, stripping Wolverine of the adamantium that coated his skeleton. This was a huge part of us learning more about Wolverine's abilities and his power set. This is when it was revealed that his claws were actually bone claws and they were themselves coated. We also learned here that he had the capacity to be intensely feral. I mean, we'd always known that Wolverine had a wild side, a feral side. It had been alluded to in the comics, but we didn't know just how wild Logan could be. Don't worry though, although Wolverine lost all of his adamantium in the fight against Magneto and his nose, Professor X made sure that Magneto paid for what he'd done, and that he could never hurt anyone again by completely cutting off his mind, in essence kinda leaving Magneto still physically alive but brain dead. It should also be noted that Magneto has killed Wolverine many times across multiple different realities and timelines. Number 2. Apocalypse. Apocalypse is a villain that Wolverine has faced across many different realities, whether with a team or on his own. In some realities, Wolverine has managed to eventually win the war against Apocalypse, but has also lost battles here and there along the way. In the X-Men animated series from the 90s, we see no exception, as Wolverine attempts to take on Apocalypse alongside the X-Men. When it's his turn to strike, he completely misses Apocalypse with his claws, who manages to escape along with most of his horsemen. Kind of embarrassing. Number 1. Dark Phoenix. While Jean Grey would likely never want to hurt Wolverine, and he has honestly almost killed her on a few occasions across the multiverse, always to her benefit of course, usually, to avoid her having to suffer. When Dark Phoenix emerges, it's quickly made apparent just how much stronger this persona and force is in comparison to Wolverine. When the darker side of Phoenix Force makes itself known at one point during Phoenix Endsong, Wolverine doesn't stand a chance against it. In fact, he only survives his fight with the Dark Phoenix because he fits into her plan, with her aiming to use him as bait. It does seem as though he succeeds in weakening the Dark Phoenix, but once again, this seems to all be part of the Phoenix Force's plan, allowing her to take a more active role as she works towards getting what she wants, which she thinks at the time is Cyclops and his unlimited energy source, his optic blasts, but in reality what Phoenix really wants is to feel whole again and feel loved. What a lovely little moral at the end of that story.
In at number 10, Sabretooth. Sabretooth is one of Wolverine's main foes. Both birthed from the Weapon X program, to an extent, the two have clashed numerous times over the years, both on panel and on screen. And while Logan has bested Sabretooth plenty of times, none beats when he straight up decapitated the mutant using the Murasama Blade. Now the Murasama Blade is a weapon in the Marvel Universe that neutralizes healing powers. Logan used this against Victor Creed to not only slice off his arm, but also to cut off his head. Moving on to number 9, Deadpool. Is Deadpool a mutant? Sometimes he claims to be, sometimes he's not. Regardless of your opinion on this, or what is technically canon, Wade Wilson, also a product of the Weapon X program's experiments, is a very strong foe that has lost to Wolverine in the past. This went down in Cable and Deadpool issue 44, when Wolverine ends up skewering Deadpool to a wall with his claws when the two duke it out at a Hydra base. It's a pretty epic duel, with both heroes doing an impressive job, but turns out that 6 blades are in fact better than 2. Sorry, Deadpool. Up next at 8, Lady Deathstrike. Let's shift from on-panel to on-screen for this number, and take a look at the battle between Lady Deathstrike and Wolverine that occurred in the X2 movie back in the early 2000s. Released in 2003, X2 X-Men United is a film based off of the God Loves, Man Kills graphic novel, with William Stryker leading an assault on the X-Mansion in order to build his own version of Cerebro and cause a mutant genocide. Now, Lady Deathstrike is controlled by Stryker, acting as his bodyguard of sorts, and towards the end of the film, Wolverine and Deathstrike battle. Logan injects her with molten adamantium, and it's not pretty. While he's never murdered her in the comics, Wolverine has fought her plenty of times, with the two of them having quite the complicated history with one another. In at 7, Omega Red. Omega Red is an X-Men supervillain who first debuted in 1992 in X-Men Volume 2, Issue 4. A serial killer in Russia who was captured and then turned over to the KGB, he underwent experiments in an attempt to recreate a super soldier the likes of Captain America. But Soviet. The result was Omega Red, who has carbonadium retractable tentacles that are housed within his arms, a regenerative healing factor, and an ability to absorb others' life forces. He also has super strength, speed, agility, durability, all that jazz, and an ability to secrete pheromones that result in sickness and death. Yikes for that last one. Omega Red is one of Logan's most enduring villains, and once upon a time, Logan straight up murdered him, also using the Murasama blade. Useful tool. The two fought for nearly 18 hours initially before Omega Red bested Logan, which caused the mutant to go after him out of revenge using the Murasama blade, stabbing him right through the heart. In at 6, Daken. Nothing like murdering your own son, am I right? Yeah? No? Well, that is actually something Wolverine has done, and his son Daken was no pushover either. Daken was not raised by Wolverine, but instead by Romulus, and has all the powers and strengths of Daddy Dearest, but with zero moral code. The two eventually duke it out, with Logan feeling the need to end his son in order to prevent any more harm. But it's not easy for him. And as he kills his offspring, his mind ventures into happier fantasies, which is really tragic. Like watching his son go to prom, and family moments like sitting around a campfire roasting marshmallows. Oh, I can't. The reality is much harsher. He drowns Daken with the young man dying in his arms. Up next at 5, all of the X-Men. From Old Man Logan. This one is a little dark, as if drowning his own son wasn't. So once upon a time in the Old Man Logan series that takes place in the alternate universe of Earth 807128, the world's supervillains took over, largely slaughtering most of the superheroes on the planet. And in the process of this conflict, Mysterio created an illusion to trick Logan into thinking that the X-Men were actually villains, luring him into battle and ultimately resulting in him unintentionally slaughtering all of them. After the illusion was lifted, Logan was filled with grief, ran into the woods, and tried to commit suicide. When that failed, he swore to never pop his claws again, leaving his past life behind. While the X-Men definitely weren't expecting to be taken out by a fellow teammate, it does go to show how strong Wolverine is if he was able to kill all of them. I mean, sure, he had the element of surprise, but it's not like he didn't have any resistance from them whatsoever in battle. On the flip side of that, let's move on to number 4, all of the villains. In Horsemen of War, we see a reverse of our previous number. Rather than killing all of his teammates, Logan takes on every single villain of the X-Men's and kills them. Homicide, it's a common theme on this list. This is a product of a what-if story in which the hypothetical explored is what if Wolverine was transformed into a Horseman of War by Apocalypse? The answer is pretty dark. Wolverine becomes the ultimate threat, not only killing Apocalypse himself, but going on a murderous spree in which he knocks off every known criminal and villain. His victims include Magneto, Mr. Sinister, Sabretooth, Mystique, Juggernaut, and more. Because of this massacre, the rest of the world got so concerned that governments actually started to hunt him down. But they didn't need to be that concerned after all. After completing his goal, Wolverine ended up going into hiding, becoming a monk at a monastery under the name of Brother Xavier. Next up at number 3, himself. There's no greater battle than the one you have with yourself. Or at least, you can expect it to be one hell of a tough one if you're as strong as Wolverine is. The 616 Wolverine fought an alternate version of himself from Earth 61112, the Age of Ultron timeline. Now in that future timeline, Ultron has taken over the world, and Wolverine, along with Sue Storm, is sent back to kill Hank Pym to prevent it. Hank being the man who created Ultron in the comics. Now once they've done that, they return to their own timeline only to discover that it has radically altered it for the worst. With Hank dead, the Kree-Skrull conflict spread to Earth and created more devastation. They end up encountering the Defenders in this timeline, and Wolverine ends up fighting himself, with the time-traveling Logan killing himself in the brawl. In at number 2, Magneto. Magneto generally has the upper hand against Wolverine. Logan's skeleton is plated with adamantium after all, which is metal. Magneto even once ripped it from his bones in one of the most disturbing attacks on an X-Men member in history. But Wolverine has gotten his day in the sun as far as the Master of Magnetism is concerned. In the Uncanny X-Men arc, Eve of Destruction, Magneto is thwarted by the X-Men team, and when he tries to make peace with them, Logan decided to take the opposite route, not falling for his tricks. He impales him with his claws, and the team leave Magneto on the ground, bleeding out. They also have a drink afterwards too, which kind of feels weird because it's like, hey, we just left a dude to bleed on the ground, but it was Magneto, so And last but not least, in our number 1 spot, Jean Grey. In X-Men Phoenix and Song, Jean Grey is so overcome with the Phoenix Force that she's no longer able to control it. She's unable to rid herself of it, and she's become an all-powerful antagonistic force, threatening the universe itself. Rather than become the Dark Phoenix again, she ends up turning to someone outside of herself for help. That someone is Logan, and he does her bidding. He ends up driving his claws through her body multiple times in order to kill her, despite the amount of internal pain this causes him. This even played out in X-Men The Last Stand on the big screen in the film adaptation. And in all forms, it's a pretty tragic moment.
Number 10, Silver Samurai. The Silver Samurai and Wolverine have an epic fight with one another in Uncanny X-Men issue 173. Kenichio Harada and Logan have a ton of history, and despite fighting one another a bunch, the two also share a mutual respect for one another. Their fight lasts 3 honestly beautiful pages. Despite Silver Samurai's ability to charge his sword using tachyon energy, making it strong enough to cut through almost anything, his sword remains no match for Wolverine's adamantium claws. Logan ends up victorious after he breaks Harada's arm, forcing the Silver Samurai to be at his mercy. In fact, he would have been killed if not for the interference of Mariko, the Silver Samurai's half-sister, and later, Viper. Number 9, the Mongrels. While we may have talked about Wolverine's famous son, Daken, on the first part of this list, we have yet to highlight how brutally Wolverine beat 5 of his other kids, who were actually originally rounded up by Daken himself. Initially. The Mongrels consist of Sophist, Shadowstalker, Cannonfoot, Fire Knives, and are led by Gunhawk. Wow, those are some names. Cannonfoot is the only one that is actually confirmed a mutant, but I feel like we simply didn't get enough time with the other members of the Mongrels to really learn what their mutant powers were, but I'm sure they had them. One can assume their power sets would at least be somewhat similar to Logan's, had we actually gotten into that. Of course, pitting the Mongrels against their father was all part of a master plan to get back at Wolverine and basically torture him. In fact, they were expected to die. A plan that was executed and orchestrated by Daken and likely the right hand. Logan killed the group of mutants without knowing that they were actually his own children, and I don't think we really even knew if they knew that he was their dad. Wolverine finds out after his connection to the Mongrels, and despite the fact that they were the ones who attacked him, Wolverine ends up feeling pretty guilty about it. Number 8, North Star. When Wolverine found himself being brainwashed and basically mind controlled by the Hand, he was sent on a mission to prove himself by eliminating Kitty Pryde. While attempting to pounce on her, claws drawn, Kitty phased, causing Logan to go through her, and his claws thereby to go through the mutant behind her, North Star. Ouch, poor Jean-Paul. He got beaten just being a bystander. He wasn't even a target in this one. You know it's impressive when Logan can take out a pretty powerful mutant just by accidentally taking them out. Number 7, John Howlett Jr. John is Wolverine's brother in an alternate universe and comes from the series Wolverine: The End, which takes place on Earth 4011. His power set is similar to his brother James Howlett and includes a regenerative healing factor. He is known by the aliases Kitsunebi, White Ghost, and X. Wolverine was forced to fight John when it was revealed that he had a plot to take over Las Vegas. Both were relatively old at this point, and following an electric explosion during a fight, Wolverine accidentally stabbed John through the chest, fatally wounding him. John's healing factor was too slow and worn down at this point to allow him to regenerate his organs in time. John forgave Wolverine as he lay dying and confessed that he was glad that it had ended this way, and he was actually really proud of his brother. Aww. Sad. I love when people are in the middle of a fight and then they reconcile everything as they're dying. This all could have been resolved if you had a conversation about how much you loved each other. Number 6, the Vaporizer. In the Ultimate Universe, Wolverine was sent to take out a nameless teenage mutant who has the power to vaporize any living tissue in his vicinity in issue number 41 of Ultimate X-Men. This mutant's powers were so powerful and uncontrollable that the boy found himself vaporizing a whole town of people without even completely realizing that he was doing it. He killed over 250 people by accident. Wolverine finds him hiding in a cave and has a talk with him about the risk that he poses to both humans and mutants alike. This mutant doesn't just lose to Wolverine, he surrenders. Despite how powerful the young boy was, this non-battle proved that sometimes all one needs to defeat an enemy is a 6-pack of beer and a brutally honest conversation. Number 5, Mystique. While Mystique might not be strong in the traditional sense, she is a very powerful mutant. Her shape-shifting abilities allow her to pull off all kinds of tricks, both in and out of combat, and she is insanely wily as a result. Wolverine was sent to track Mystique down and take her out by Cyclops. In issue 65 of Wolverine Volume 3, we see these two have a final showdown in the desert. Mystique actually manages to put up a pretty good fight in this comic, using guns and grenades to hold Wolverine at bay, but eventually she succumbs to too many stab wounds during their fight. Wolverine, of course, just eventually heals himself. Despite defeating her and leaving Mystique weak enough that it would be possible for Wolverine to just take Raven out right there, he chooses to leave her bleeding out in the desert with a loaded gun, claiming that she knows what it's for. Ooh, that is dark. He's like, I'm not like you can use this gun. And I'm like, Wolverine, you kill people all the time, dude. What you talking about? You got some similarities there, I think. Number 4, the Hellfire Club. The Hellfire Club is basically one of the big bads of the X-Men world. They are an organization of criminal and mutant masterminds who aim to weigh the scales in the mutants' favor when it comes to world domination. That's right, they want to take over the world like most mutant bad guys do. They also dress like they're from Victorian England because, well, I guess they can. But despite their appearances, they still have some fairly strong members and a bunch of minions loyal to them. So don't think that just because they look ridiculous in their Victorian England dress that they are ridiculous, because they're not. But despite having an army of loyal members, this wasn't enough to stop Wolverine. In Uncanny X-Men issue 133, Wolverine takes down their entire brigade, all on his own, in an attempt to save the rest of the X-Men, who found themselves captured by them. Embarrassingly for Cyclops, while Wolverine takes on pretty much the entire Hellfire Club's army of minions, Scott struggles to take on Mastermind by himself in a fight on the astral plane. Wow. Keep up here, bub. Number 3, Cyclops. I know what you're thinking, so wait a minute, Amanda, doesn't Cyclops usually beat Wolverine? Well, you're right, he usually does beat Wolverine. However, there have been a few occasions where Wolverine has come out on top. One, in the 90s animated cartoon, there is a scene where Wolverine fights Cyclops, except it isn't really Cyclops, it ends up just being a robot, as Cyclops at the time is getting married to Jean Grey. However, Wolverine does best this simulation of Cyclops, which is pretty impressive, even though it's just a simulation. And number 2, there is a time when Wolverine comes very, very close to basically killing Cyclops, in my opinion, and that would be in X-Men Schism. At the end of X-Men Schism number 4, we actually see that Wolverine is just about to finish off Cyclops, claws drawn, about to smash him right in the face with those claws. We pick up on X-Men Schism number 5, and the two continue to fight. It seems that Cyclops is basically blasting Wolverine down to bones, but the cool thing about this is that Wolverine is still intact. Although he doesn't have a lot of flesh on him, he's still actually able to fight Scott. And he actually probably would have finished them if it wasn't for Hope coming in and defending them from the Sentinel that's about to basically, well, kill both of them at that point. Still, if they'd continued, I'm telling you, those claws would have gone right into Cyclops' eyes, right into his head, and he'd be dead. Number 2, Gorgon. These two faced off in Wolverine Volume 3, Issue 31 during the Enemy of the State story arc. Gorgon is known for being a fearsome villain who can, as his codename implies, turn enemies to stone with one simple glance. In fact, Gorgon has actually successfully killed Wolverine before. That's just how even of a match he and Wolverine are. He then had Wolverine resurrected and brainwashed him so that he might use him as his own assassin, turning him against his friends and colleagues in the hero community. In the end, though, Wolverine got him back, and he got him back good. During their fight in issue 31, Wolverine seems to take a page out of Perseus's book. He defeats Gorgon using his own claws to reflect his own gaze back unto himself, turning Gorgon into stone before shattering him into a million pieces. Number 1, X-24. We gotta occasionally go cinematic when talking about Wolverine, and though we've already talked about Wolverine versus Wolverine on the part 1 of this list, that was an alternate version of Wolverine himself in the comics, and this is a clone, younger, more durable version of him from the same universe in the film Logan. Geez, I love this film. If you have time to rewatch this film, go do it. It's so good. Wolverine takes on X-24 more than once in the film, and although he has help in defeating him, regardless, it's still a fight worth mentioning, as X-24 was stated by Hugh Jackman to be like Wolverine, but in a permanent berserker rage, which is terrifying. That's like an unstoppable version of Wolverine, but he stopped it. It's also impressive impressive to see an old and rundown Logan even manage to take on X-24, even with the assistance of Laura, aka X-23, and her friends. And sure, Logan himself died in the end, but really only at the cost of helping to actually take out X-24.
Kicking off the list at number 10, we have Dirtnap. No real name also, just goes by Dirtnap. So sick. Making his first few little steps in Wolverine Volume 2, issue 95, Dirtnap is a mutant that can absorb living beings and take their forms. The Kirby of the Marvel Universe, essentially. Now, he ran into Wolverine for the first time when Dirtnap absorbed a small child, and then right after he attempted to absorb Wolverine, seeing as Logan's healing factor would make that pretty exhausting, Dirtnap absorbed a rat, and then he fled the scene, instead of, absorbing a faster creature. Maybe one that could fly would be nice. So he started off as a mutant with his amazing ability, and now he's forever a rat like Peter Pettigrew. A rat with a red smiley face. Just, ugh, how comforting is that? Number 9, Roughhouse. Just that name alone, you know you're in for a little bit of trouble. He first appeared in Wolverine Volume 2, Issue 4. It was speculated that Roughhouse was from Asgard. He has mythological origins, but still he was classified as a mutant. He's a descendant from the Asgardian native rock trolls, so he could be a god, he could be a troll, he could be a giant, who knows. Either way, he's trouble. His appearance isn't just a style choice also. He actually let the hair grow out to hide all the scars from his horrible father that he left behind. In Wolverine Volume 2, Issue 18, Wolverine had to go head-to-head with the mythical man, and at this point, Geist's men gave Roadhouse experimental narcotics, and it just drove him insane, as most experimental narcotics do. So when Wolverine fought him, he was kind of taking it easy on him in a way, seeing as he was out of it, he was kind of loopy. Wolverine came face-to-face with Roughhouse after the adamantium was stripped from his skeleton, and Logan actually lost this fight. He got knocked out, and then Roughhouse took him back to his hideout, where he and Bloodscream tortured Wolverine for days. He's an Asgardian descendant, so Roughhouse has super speed, super strength, all the usual super stuff, but like Logan, Roughhouse too inherited the healing factor. He's been referred to as the weaker Wolverine despite his mythical background. Number 8, Bloodscream. Another villain that helped Roughhouse with the torture of Wolverine was Bloodscream. These names are so violent, oh my god. So Bloodscream entered comics in issue 4 of Wolverine Volume 2. He was originally a surgeon named Zachariah Ravenscraft, and he would travel with Sir Francis Drake back in the 17th century. So he's a little bit old. What's his secret to everlasting life? Well, let me tell you. Canadian natives injured the doctor during a scuffle, and then he was forced to meet a healer named Dagu to treat him. Dagu used an eldritch spell to keep him in between life and death, resulting in this vampire hybrid of a man. Now the name Bloodscream is making more sense now, I bet. Immortal and always hungry, Bloodscream demands Dagu to set him back to doctor mode. Reverse this curse, please and thank you, sir. Now in order to do so, he needed the blood of another immortal. Bloodscream met Wolverine for the first time in World War II, and that's when he first thought that the mutant was immortal. So him and Roughhouse often paired up to attempt to take him down numerous times. Number 7, Cyber. Silas Burr made his first appearance in Marvel Comics Presents issue 85. He was born in Canada over 100 years ago. They're all so old. What's going on? He was an agent for the Pinkerton National Detective Agency in 1912, but was charged with 22 counts of murder and put on trial in Iowa. Not a great guy. And yes, he was guilty on all of those charges. He was about to be hanged, but Victor Creed, aka Sabretooth, was posing as a guard and helped Burr escape. After that, Burr was taken to the Canadian Army's training facility where he met Frederick Hudson, who was impressed by Burr because of how pushy and controlling he was for the men below him. So Hudson put Burr in command of the Devil's Brigade, which included Logan. So he was bossing Logan around. He was the one who pushed Logan non-stop to be made into this animal. So in Wolverine Origins, Romulus decided to give Burr a little upgrade in the form of adamantium, taking on this new fitting alias, Cyber. Number 6, Dr. Rot. Nice. That name is pretty disgusting right off the top. Now his real name is a little more tame. His name's Algernon Rotwell. He was sent to Dunwich Sanatorium because he was mad, but he wasn't superpowered by any means, just a little bit insane. While he was in there, he was able to start a riot and take control, which led him to harvesting the employees' brains. So he made this god brain machine, and yes, it's as gross as you would imagine. Check it out. Squishy. Imagine the smell. So he captured Logan, made him lose his memory, tortured him, and then claimed the only way to get better there is just to embrace and let go of all that anger and aggression. Just let it out. They wanted him to let it out and to hurt people. So he found out these code phrases that were put in from Weapon X, so he made Logan do all these brutal attacks, and he wasn't even sure if he was awake or not. It was wild. It was a bad time. Dr. Rot was honestly pretty badass for a guy who has no powers. He created the flesh puppets using Logan's brain tissue. Also, yeah, flesh puppets. That's a nice way to say zombies. Number 5, Charlie Chainsaw. This guy is literally 2 chains. Whenever I see that one card from Cards Against Humanity, the one that says chainsaws for hands, I always laugh because that's such a terrible situation to be in. I'm always like, imagine this dude, imagine him as a villain, we'd be doomed. Well, lo and behold, he's a villain, and we're doomed. He first appeared in Wolverine Weapon X issue 7. He was the guy wandering around without hands, actually, at this point. The staff was following him in the hallways, asking for Charlie to come back. He was like, what do? I don't have hands, I can't open doors, help. And then 6 pages later, the surgery is complete. Charlie Chainsaw is born. Charlie remained loyal to Rotwell until Logan ripped through those chainsaws. Damn, that sounds like a pretty stressful life. He's for sure a chain smoker. Number 4, Spore. Making his first appearance in Wolverine Volume 2, Issue 21, Spore is a living bioweapon created from the Deviants. This was way back when they were at war with the Eternals in the prehistoric era. So Spore consumed everything in its path, be it humans, deviants, and even Eternals. He targeted the Celestials, so they naturally had to destroy him during the second host. But in the next issue, Spore came back to life. Turns out when he was liquefied, he was absorbed into all that soil underneath him. So when that land became a controlled area for Felix Guillermo Caridad to grow his stuff, his bad stuff that I can't say, some of those narcotics that he was using was infused with Spore. So Felix became the next Spore, and it's an awful, awful conundrum. Number 3, Gorgon. Tommy Shishido made his first appearance in Wolverine Volume 3, Issue 20, and from birth, Tommy was a fast learner. At just 2 weeks old, he spoke a full sentence, and at 3 months old, he was walking around on his own. At age 1, reading and writing was part of his normal day, and at age 4, he was ranked one of the top 5 artists in modern Japan. And then come birthday number 13, he discovered he was a mutant. He had low-level telepathy, he could read minds from a short distance, but you don't want to have a staring contest with him at all, because if he locks eyes with you, you'll literally turn into stone. He remained blindfolded, relying on his telepathic abilities to carry him in battle, and it worked. He was actually pretty sick. The media dubbed him as the Gorgon, like the Medusa of our time. He found the Hand Sanctuary and within a year became their high priest, where he ran the ninja clan. Number 2, Razor Fist. After getting his arms cut off, master martial artist Douglas Scott got a pretty shiny upgrade instead of those hands. He worked alongside his brother William Scott, and after Shang-Chi defeated both the mercenaries, Razor Fist started to work with the crime lord Roche in Madripoor. His job was to assassinate Wolverine, which, okay, easy peasy, sure, sounds great. Now the first fight, Wolverine actually did lose. Razor Fist shucked him off of a cliff. Nice. Now the next encounter, Razor Fist got what was coming. He tried to take on Hawkeye as well at one point. He was trying to cut off his right arm for a reward, but Razor Fist isn't superpowered. He's just a guy with blades for hands. I mean, who would you rather fight, honestly? Razor Fist or Chainsaw Charlie? I feel like Charlie would be better because you'd hear him. He's loud at least, so you have like a warning. I don't know. Both are pretty terrifying. Both are equally as terrifying. And finally, number 1, Romulus. That guy I mentioned earlier in this list. Let's talk about him. He made his first appearance in Wolverine Volume 3, Issue 55. Romulus claims to have been born in prehistoric times, born as one of the Lupine, these feral humans that evolved from canines rather than apes. But in Wolverine Volume 2, Issue 312, it's exposed that his origins are all just a fib, and the bones that Romulus planted at the elephant graveyard were just distractions. Nothing to do with his past or anything like that. He does have powers. Like Wolverine, his regenerative healing factor saves the day pretty often. Later on, he comes to fight Wolverine equipped. He has these black gloves that have 4 blades attached. 3 of them similar to Logan's adamantium claws, but he also has a 4th one, and it's like thumbs almost. They can take quite the beating from Logan's claws being adamantium as well. But when it comes to thumb wars, Romulus wins. That's it. He's got the other one. He can thumb war anyone. Kicking off the list at number 10, we have the Orb. He made his first appearance in Ghost Rider Volume 6, Issue 26. The Orb is, well, yeah, he's a guy with an eyeball for a head. Cool. That's a notable feature, I'd say. Well, he was born like that. His parents abandoned him at an early age because of it. Sad stuff. Now, the eye can do much more than freak people out and make squishy noises. The eye can blast people with a red energy beam, and he can walk on walls. So it's only fair that he's crossed paths with Spider-Man and Wolverine during this weird life. In Astonishing Spider-Man and Wolverine, the Orb has backup. He's got a group of robbers called Orblings, which I gotta say, it's a great name for a group. They're trying to get their hands on these rare jewels locked away in a bank. And as they're fighting each other, the three of them get transported across the timeline thanks to those, well, time diamonds. As if fighting an eyeball wasn't weird enough, this alternate timeline made the Orb even bigger and more powerful. He was well equipped to take on Peter and Logan. Number 9, the Iron Monk. Appearing only in Wolverine Volume 2, Issue 108, the Iron Monk was an assassin sent by the Hand to take down Wolverine and Pale Flower. This happened right after the two interrupted the group's plans in Japan, so the Tokyo Metropolitan Police had them locked up. So all of a sudden, the Iron Monk teleports into these holding cells, attacks all the guards, rips off the door to Logan's holding cell, and this guy was laughing at Wolverine and Pale Flower when they were trying to attack. It was useless to try and attack this guy. Nothing was working against the Iron Monk's durability. That was his main thing. And then all of a sudden, Yohei appeared and gave Wolverine the honor sword of the clan Yoshida, a sword that was forged from meteorite iron by a demon. Yeah, sounds like it's gonna do the trick. And before we continue on with this epic part 2, if you want to go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, honestly, it really helps our channel a lot. All you gotta do is go, and then that's it. Then we can bring you more content, you look brighter, maybe I'll get a haircut, who knows? Good things will happen if you click like, basically, or subscribe. Oh my God, if you hit subscribe. Number 8, Tiger Shark. Not a tiger shark, but Tiger Shark. Meet Todd Arliss. He made his first appearance in Submariner issue 5. He was once a talented swimmer who took part in the Olympic Games, but after damaging his spinal cord saving a man, Todd was desperate to get back into the water. So he participated in an experiment performed by Dr. Lemuel Dorcas. He's a dork, sorry, I had to. That's where he had his DNA merged with Namor and a tiger shark. So obviously now we have a new supervillain. His personality changed as well as his abilities. He was initially a foe of Namor, of course, but in Wolverine Volume 2, Issue 19, Logan got a little wet and wild himself. Fighting underwater, turns out, was much harder. Wolverine gets his claws literally stuck in a reef at one point. Honestly, I felt like I was drowning while reading these 2 issues. A little stressful. Number 7, Spiral. Ricochet Rita was once a professional stunt performer. She became friends with a guy named Longshot who was actually from, well, not Earth, he was from Mojoverse. She was then attacked by this insane future version of herself named Spiral. Now thankfully she was able to defeat Spiral, but after that she followed her heart. She went back to the dimension with Longshot. She went back to the Mojoverse. And then when they got there, they were both captured by Mojo himself. And Longshot's mind was wiped. He forgot Rita entirely. And as for Rita, well, things get actually a lot worse and more confusing. Mojo got his scientist Ares to modify her mentally and physically, so now she's got 6 arms, he turned her hair gray, and she could also see other dimensions, so a bit of an upgrade, that's cool. She was a twisted version of Mojo in a way, and she was trained in the dark arts of magic and body modification. So this future version of her was just that. It was a dark future of what ended up happening. Nice little time loop there. Spiral also appears in the X-Men animated series, and she makes Wolverine's life hell in Volume 2, Issue 51. I'd love to see Spiral fight 6-armed Spider-Man. I wonder who would win that one. Number 6, Deathbird. Making her first appearance in Miss Marvel issue 9, Kelsey Naramani was born the eldest child of the Magister Naramani. She was born heir of the Shi'ar Empire's throne. What luck. Must be nice. She was born with bird-like features. She was born with uncontrollable rage, and she's even got a set of claws as well. Deathbird was once recruited to serve Apocalypse as the Horseman War. She's mainly an X-Men villain, but with such similar features, I figured this list and this part 2 would be a great time to bring her name up because she's a total badass. Number 5, Deathwatch. First entering comics in Ghost Rider Volume 3, Issue 1, Deathwatch is a demon. How fun is that? But he poses as a crime boss named Stephen Lawrence, so, okay, not totally a demon. One of his first things that he did actually was order his Death Spawn ninjas to steal a large amount of biotoxin and attack New York. So right off the bat, he is a horrible villain. He gets his energy from pain and death, and he can connect to you mentally with just one touch. So you don't want to be anywhere near him. Doesn't feel too good. During Marvel Comics Presents issue 71, he got himself on Logan's death list, right after Wolverine bumped into his men in Madripoor. He carries a katana with him and firearms, and if there's one guy to absorb pain and death from, well, Wolverine's got quite a bit to give. Number 4, Doombringer. Also known as the Walker Between Worlds, Doombringer appeared once and only once, despite his menacing name. Wolverine's Doombringer was released back in 1997. It's a story told from the Madripoor years where Logan is uncovering the mystery of an ancient Japanese tale about the Doombringer, which was currently on its way to destroy us all. Lovely. The story puts Wolverine and the Silver Samurai against a 5-alarm freak from hell, as Logan puts it. Now the fight itself is just a mess. It's just guts and blood everywhere. Even Wolverine thinks, okay, the only way I can win here is just survive. Just give the most amount of blood and then we're good. And that's basically how it ends. The Doombringer is massive, it's scaly, it has sharp claws. It's definitely not one of Wolverine's easy days, that's for sure. Number 3, Mr. X. Making his first appearance in Wolverine Volume 2, issue 159, Mr. X is the only name given about this guy, and he was kind of obsessed with death growing up. He saw a woman get hit by a car at a young age, and then trauma ensued. And then at the same time, it unlocked his mutant ability, being that of telepathy. He trained in combat with numerous teachers, where he would get so good that he would then just take them out afterwards. He would learn from them and then kill them. Guy's ruthless. He was obsessed with violence, so when he heard about Wolverine, he was like, oh, I have to fight this guy, let's do it. Mr. X wanted to be the best, and he did beat Logan in their first encounter. Later on, however, in issue 168 during the annual Bloodsport tournament in Madripoor, Mr. X was beating everybody along the way. He even beat Taskmaster at some point. How crazy is that? That telepathy sure does come in handy. He knew which hits were coming and when. Pretty unfair, but also pretty cool, I have to admit. Number 2, the Mongrels. Wolverine hooks up with many women over his long lifespan. I don't know how to put it lightly, but yeah, he has a lot of kids that run around. Sometimes those kids grow up and seek revenge on their mutant father, and the Mongrels are just that. The Mongrels are Logan's kids that grew up to become Shadowstalker, Fire Knives, Soft Fist, Gunhawk, and Cannonfoot. Okay, pretty sweet names. Pretty to the point names. They first appeared in Wolverine Volume 4, Issue 1. Their only goal was to ruin Logan's life. That's it. Just cause pain and suffering. So they joined the Red Right Hand, where they were trained to be used as literal weapons, hence those fun names. And then in Wolverine Volume 4, Issue 4, Gunhawk burned down a room filled with Wolverine's mementos and prized possessions over his long life. All this happened while Logan was literally in hell. So while he was down there melting, they were burning his stuff both on Earth as well. It's a lot of fire. Once Logan did get out of hell, 9 issues later, he invaded the Red Right Hand's base, where the Mongrels then attacked him. They didn't make it too far, but Logan did give them a chance to surrender peacefully, so you gotta give him that. Not bad for a guy who just escaped hell. We actually just did a list on our top 10 superheroes who beat the devil, so if this kind of stuff intrigues you, be sure to check that out once you're done here. And finally, number 1, Deadpool. Wolverine villains you won't believe exist? Well, okay, here's one for you. Before all those box office records, Ryan Reynolds played the Merc, well, without a mouth, back in 2009. X-Men Origins Wolverine was a train wreck. It was a horrible take on Wade Wilson. The film was made during the 2007 writer's strike, so it was just a mess from the get-go. I feel like now we can rip this movie apart because, you know, it's in the past. Logan's good, he had his great ending. Deadpool's now in the MCU after 2 successful R-rated movies, so he's good. It's cool. We can make fun of it now. At the beginning of this movie, it's kind of close. I mean, Wade is quick with the quips, and the action, although it's aged and cheesy, is still at least entertaining. That is until later on in the movie when he returns for a big showdown with Wolverine, and it's just not the guy we want. His mouth is sewn shut, it's not even close. Not the guy, just not the guy.